Okay, so I'm really excited to introduce Maria Oliver, who is a friend of mine from many years ago. Maria teaches yoga to adults, children, pregnant women, and new mums. And she wrote her first book of children's relaxations during lockdown in 2020. And then she went on to publish her yoga picture book earlier this year. And today, Maria and I are going to discuss yoga and how we might use yoga in the English language classroom. So, Maria, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into yoga teaching.
I got into yoga teaching because about 15 years ago, I had a problem with my neck. So this is all about my posture and about stress. I had work-related stress, and I'm going to just swivel sideways. I'd be sitting at my desk like this, and then I'd get a stressful email and I'd tense up like that. And it was affecting my breathing and my shoulders. And then one day I realized I couldn't turn my head. So I was having to cross the road like that. And I got referred for physio. And the physio said, you should try Alexander Technique because it's all about your posture. This is what's causing the problem. And the Alexander Technique teacher just happened to be a yoga teacher as well. So she said, you need to start coming to yoga because it's better for you to have a regular practice than it is to just have occasional physio and Alexander Technique sessions. So I got into yoga, and then I had children, and I found the yoga was amazing when I was pregnant, and it was amazing when I'd had my children. And the idea popped into my head out of the blue that I could train to be a teacher as well. And so that's what I did. I started off teaching adults, and then I added on extra modules for pregnancy, postnatal. And then as my children got bigger, I wanted to learn how I could engage them in yoga because they just weren't interested at all. So the children's yoga was a way of using imagination and games and storytelling to get them involved.
Right. So, for example, how is teaching yoga to children different from teaching adults, for example?
It's totally different because you have to engage them. They have to want to join in. You can't just say to a room of children, right, you've all got to do this pose and you're doing it wrong and you're not doing it right and you're not listening. You've got to make them want to join in. So I use stories. I might use well-known picture books like Julia Donaldson or Mog or something like that. And for each bit of the story, you just come up with a pose. So for example, loads of yoga poses are named after animals. So any story that's got animals in, it's really easy. There's a tiger pose, there's cat, there's obviously downward facing dog. If they're in a forest, you do tree pose, really straightforward. Sometimes you have to be a bit more inventive. So if you're doing Goldilocks and there's a pot of porridge, you can't see all of me, but you can sit with your legs wide and stir a pot of porridge, and then you're stretching down the backs of your legs. So it's all about the story. The story does the structure of the class. In an adult class, you're thinking more about, because children are so bendy and supple, you don't have to worry quite so much about warming them up. You can kind of start to dive straight in, and children are quite intuitive. So if something hurts, they're not going to force themselves to do it. Whereas adults, I find, have kind of lost that connection with their bodies, and they're sort of worried about doing it right and maybe force themselves to try and reach something that maybe they shouldn't be. So with an adult class, you'd be thinking more about warming up joints and muscles and then sort of building up to a peak posture. So for example, if you were building up to headstand, you'd want to be working on your core muscles. You'd want to be mobilizing your shoulders because the shoulders take a lot of the weight, and also the backs of the legs, because when you go up into a headstand, you need to be nice and stretchy down the backs of your legs before you kick your legs up, for example. So yeah, totally different structure and totally different way of preparing for the classes.
And so, like, for example, do you with children's classes, or especially with younger children, do you make it more dynamic than maybe an adult class, so they're not spending so long in a pose?
Yeah, I kind of get any class to get them to listen to their body. So I'm not there counting, this is how long you should be saying in this for. I might suggest to adults, I'll hold it for 2 or 3 breaths, and it's their own breath. With a child, it'll just be like, let's all do this, and they'll do it, and they'll decide if they want to stay in it or not. And if you can imagine a load of 3-year-olds, they're going to be doing all sorts of random things, and you're not worried so much about how accurate their version is. It's just like, are they moving? Are they doing something completely different and random but still moving? Are they saying, well, this is how I do a fox pose, and that's wonderful too, because they're using their imagination. So yeah, it is very dynamic. It does move on quite quickly. I do sometimes get quite out of breath, and again, because the sequencing is sort of dictated by the story, you can be standing up for one pose and sitting down for the next one, whereas with adults you might have a few sitting down poses and then a few on hands and knees, and then you transition to standing up. So yeah, totally different feel, totally different energy.
And which is more fun for you?
Well, I do actually like both. I was so excited when I started doing the children's yoga training, because I've never laughed so much on a training course and just came home buzzing with ideas. And it did actually make me start to bring the idea of playfulness to my adult classes, because when you're an adult and you see on Instagram like people who are impossibly skinny and bendy, and they're doing these wonderful poses and they look great in a photograph, and so we've got this idea in our head, like, this is the goal, we've got to be able to do this perfect pose, and I've got to work at my flexibility and strength so I can be like that particular person. But when I say, like, we're just going to play with this, we're not trying to achieve this, we're playing with the idea of it, then the pressure's off. You're just playing and exploring, and you're curious, and it's like, how will I feel when I do this? There was a cartoon that was doing the rounds about warrior pose that you might have seen, and it gets shared on Facebook every now and then, and there's someone doing a warrior pose, but around her are all these thoughts like, am I doing this right? Am I doing anything right? Do I need the toilet? And things like that. And there's a wonderful teacher called Donna Fahy, who's an international, wonderfully highly respected yoga teacher. And she said, instead of asking ourselves these questions, why aren't we saying things like, how do I feel when I'm in this pose? How can I change this pose so it serves me better? What will happen if I adjust things slightly? How does that make me feel? So instead of worrying and thinking like outwardly, am I doing this right? Does it look like it does on the photos? It's like, oh, actually, how am I feeling like this? And have I tensed my arms up? Are my shoulders by my ears? If I drop them, how do I feel? If I focus on my breathing, how does that make me feel? And things like that. That sort of idea of playfulness and exploring, I've brought that into my adult classes, and that I think makes it more enjoyable, and people feel they're not attending so that they can perform or compete or be judged.
What about in schools? Because I know that like quite a lot of teachers like to introduce yoga into their lessons. What do you think, what are the benefits of yoga for children when they're at school, for example, within the classroom? And do you ever go into schools and teach children in their school environment?
Yes, I do. So I have been teaching at schools during the school day. Sometimes a school will employ me when it's something like Children's Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, and I'll go in and I'll teach every single year group. There have been schools as well who'll employ me to come and teach every week, and we actually do it in the school hall. And what I think is lovely is that because it's non-competitive, and because we're talking about how you're feeling inside, it's something that they're doing that isn't being assessed, that they're not in competition with each other, and they're learning skills that are so important. I wish someone had taught me about breathing when I was growing up, because I'm asthmatic. I used to really struggle, and so I was very much up here. And when I was an adult, I learned about breathing down into my diaphragm, and my asthma has improved. I've got a tool so that if I ever feel anxious and my shoulders are tensing up, I can notice it happening and start to slow my breathing down. and then I instantly feel so much better. So I think you're giving these kids a toolkit that wasn't around when we were children, and I think it's really important. And then I hear back about how they've come home and they've shown their families what they've been doing at school. One amazing story was from a mum who said that her and her daughter got really wound up with each other, and her daughter, who was about 5 at the time, suddenly said, "Should we do some breathing?" And her mum's like, "What?" And they started doing breathing, and they're just doing breathe in, draw up, breathe out, draw across, and they drew a square in time with their breathing, and they both calmed right down and could sort out whatever it was that was bugging both of them. And Sam thought, wow, that's amazing. She's definitely learned something from doing the yoga classes with me.
Yeah, I mean, things like breathing, that's just something that I try to incorporate as well in my classes and with the materials that I'm writing as well, especially for things like, managing their emotions, especially with younger children. And that's breathing, those breathing techniques are a way of relaxing and just calming down and managing your feelings and just taking a step back. And so, yeah, I think any just really, really small techniques like these can be really, really effective in many different areas and parts of, especially in a classroom where there are lots of different things that can kind of affect how a child is feeling in that moment, or even the teacher. The teachers get
Yes,
stressed as
yeah.
well. The teachers can also benefit from these kind of just little tips to say, okay, I'm going to take a moment, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths. And also for classroom management as well, if the class is getting really rowdy or whatever, just to kind of take a moment and do those kind of things. Do you think that any teacher can use, I guess breathing techniques and things like that, but what about yoga activities? Can any teacher do it, even if they're not trained in yoga? And if so, what can they do to prepare if they want to start introducing a few, little yoga activities in their lessons?
I think it helps if they've got a yoga practice themselves, if they know how it feels in their own body. I think there are a lot of resources out there, and I do think it's nice if they actually join in. Sometimes I'll go into a school and I'll do a class and the teacher's not really engaged, but if they're joining in, they're showing how important it is and they're modelling it. I know a lot of schools use YouTube videos and they'll just put the video on and the children will get on with it. And I don't know how often the teacher will join in, but I think you have to feel it in your own body and understand just how beneficial it is. And I'll be doing it when I'm teaching. I'm like, oh gosh, I really needed to do that today. I'm feeling this in my body. How are you feeling? I'll do that with my adults and with the children that I'm teaching. So I do think you need to understand yourself. You can't just go through the motions. And I mean, I'm not a naturally bendy person, but I like to think when I'm demonstrating, it's clear that my body is used to doing these movements. Even if I can't get my leg behind my head, I know where my limits are and I can describe to people how to do it in a way that someone who's not regularly practicing yoga might not quite understand it. But yeah, I think you do need the experience of feeling it in your own body before you can pass it on to others.
Yeah, I mean, I've used yoga, especially through stories in the classroom, and yeah, I think, like you said, it's really important for a teacher to get involved and do it along with the class as well. For me, that's really important, rather than just standing at the front and saying, okay, now do a cat cow pose, or now, or if it's through a story, say now do pretend you're a table or something. But yeah, to do it, to get down on the floor and do it, I think, especially with younger children, that's really important. Before you talked a bit about stories, about doing yoga through stories, and I think that stories work really well because they provide a narrative for students to follow as they listen. I'm an English language teacher, and I think a lot of people who are watching this are also English language teachers. And our kind of main focus needs to be teaching the language, or at least exposing students to the language. And I think stories work really well for that, because you're telling a story, they're listening, and they're showing comprehension of the story, and they're using the yoga poses to show that comprehension using their bodies.
Yeah.
Your latest book, Once Upon a Time You.
Oh yeah.
Is basically a story, but it's a choose your own adventure story.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit more about this book, and how a teacher might use it in a classroom, for example?
Okay, well, the idea came about because in some of my younger classes, we would often make stories up together. So the children who knew lots of yoga poses, I'd say, we'll make up a story together. We're going to sit in a circle, and then each child's going to choose what happens next. So I might say, I'm in boat pose. So we're on a boat. Who else is on the boat? The next one might say there's a bear on the boat, so we can all do bear pose. And then the next one will say there's a pirate on the boat, and we'll do a warrior pose. And then I'll say, where are we going to? We're going to an island, and there's a palm tree, so we'll do a palm tree pose, and so on. So you can make stories up that way. And I thought how nice it was that we got some choice. So I was still giving them a structure, because it would go a bit crazy sometimes, and we sort of, there'd be a cast of thousands involved, and we all ended up with a big party. And I'm like, well, how are we going to round this up now and come to an end? But I thought I wanted to make a picture book that gave children choices, and also you could sort of fit it into any length of time you wanted. So I came up with this idea that you're starting off doing mountain pose, and something is flying towards you, and what could it be? So that's the first choice. You can choose between a dragon or a winged horse or an eagle, and each character is going to ask you to help it on this adventure, and they're all gender neutral, so you can choose what gender your friend is, and that it's referred to your friend throughout. And then you can choose where you're going to go, because you have to go to different places to search for something or pick things up. And really, a lot of it just fell into place from there. There are a lot of yoga picture books out there that have got things like, different animals. So, go to Africa. We don't go to Africa in this book, but we could have done easily, because you could do a giraffe pose and an elephant pose. You could there's all sorts of different animals. I could have added Australia in easily. So they're not totally original ideas, the idea of going somewhere and exploring all the poses related to that place and the animals there. But I like the idea you could choose, where do you want to go? And then you can choose when the story ends. So if you've had enough, if your child's tired, it's theirs, are you ready to end? And then you go to the end, and it's the end of the story, and it ends in relaxation. And it just all sort of fell into place really quickly. I went from having this vague idea that seemed quite complicated to suddenly seeing this is exactly how it's going to look on the page, and these are the pictures I need for it. So that's how it started. And I spoke to a couple of illustrators who I liked their style and wanted to work with them, and they were both quite busy. And to be honest, I really respect freelance creatives, and I got the feeling I wouldn't be able to pay them what they were worth. And so I said to one of them, if I did my own pictures, would you help me? And she said, absolutely. So she gave me some tips, and I just got rolling with it. And she also did all the technical things like scanning it in and checking that it was the right quality. So a certain number of dots per inch for printing and so on. So we worked together. Her name's Lizzie Martell, and she's an amazing illustrator. And so we actually managed to get this book done really quickly. It all just fell into place. And then I tested it out on a few of my classes in schools, and it worked really well. And then they all wanted it, and they wanted to look at all the pictures. So they're quite detailed pictures. And you can look at as much or as little of it as you like. So there's the forest, for example, and you can find the different creatures and the poses that go with them. But also, if you've decided that you're helping the flying horse, the foal is hiding behind a tree, so you can spot the foal, and so on. So I like the idea of having different things to spot, different things to do on each page. You don't have to do all the poses. The story's circular, so you could keep going back to different places and make it go on forever if you wanted to. And at the end you always end with a relaxation. So that's it, kind of all built and fell into place.
No, it's great.
Yeah,
It's really nice. and it's amazing that you've done the illustrations as well.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't had the chance to try it out with a class, because I haven't got a class at the moment, but I think it'd be really, really nice to use in a classroom. You mentioned that, you know, having students choose, children choose. For me, this is another really important thing to have in the classroom, to provide some kind of choice, to give students choice, to, you know, make them feel, you know, that they have some, you know, some responsibility and some autonomy in the classroom, which they don't often get in a lot of classrooms. So, you know, a story where they get to choose where they go next, or what they do next, and what the ending is has everything for me. I really want to try it out. Over the last couple of years, I've been thinking more about using, you know, yoga techniques and mindfulness techniques as a way of dealing with classroom management, a way of helping create a more calm, focused atmosphere in a classroom, you know, to make sure that the children are ready to learn. And I like to use yoga stories, for moments when I notice that the students are a bit restless and they need some kind of movement or a bit of a brain break if they've been sitting down for a long time. And sometimes I also use like guided visualizations for quieter, calmer periods. And your other book, Red Kites, Apples and Blood Cells, contains relaxation scripts. Can you tell us a little bit more about this one?
Okay, well, I wrote that in lockdown last year, and the way it came about was I had to change to suddenly teaching online, and I'd never heard of Zoom until just before lockdown, when a friend who's a Pilates teacher just said, right, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to send you a Zoom meeting link, and we're going to meet tomorrow, and I'll show you how easy it is. And at the time I was terrified. So I started teaching on Zoom, and I started making videos of myself to share with my class members, and then discovered that because of copyright law, I couldn't read someone else's book on a video without permission from the publisher. And yoga teachers love books. We study texts as part of our training. And it's really nice to read a guided visualization at the end of class. So every yoga class ends with a relaxation session. So I kind of felt at a bit of a loss not being able to read anyone else's words anymore. But I am an English graduate, and I've always loved creative writing. And on a couple of my yoga teacher training courses, we actually looked at different things that should be in a guided relaxation. So I kind of felt I've got the tools here to write my own. I just need to seize the day and do it. And it also felt like last year, all the rules went out the window. So it's like, why shouldn't I just self-publish a book? Couldn't be bothered to go around trying to get some kind of validation from publishers, and didn't have the energy to just be sending off a manuscript and getting rejections. So I thought, I'm going to do it myself. And I looked into it and found it was possible. Worked with an illustrator who she's a digital illustrator, and she was absolutely wonderful to work with. So I'd written my relaxations. They were all on a Word document, and she would and her husband would come up with ideas. So it's Ben and Steph Grandis. And I said it was really important to me that the children were from diverse backgrounds. I wanted children to look in the book and say, there's someone who looks a bit like me. So I actually approached parents of children who I knew were may have had disabilities, or maybe Black or mixed race. And for example, this is a young lady. She has a hearing aid, and she's mixed race as well, and she's picking an apple. And I did worry as a white person how weird it might look me approaching these people, but they were like, oh yeah, she'd love to be in the book. And so, you know, my friend said to me, well, I could have just put a hearing aid on someone's ear. And I'm like, no, I want a child who actually wears one. I want her image in there. So I would get sent these photographs, and then the illustrators would turn them into these gorgeous pictures. So it all came together. I do use them on adults as well. So there's 15 different scenarios, and a lot of them incorporate breathing awareness in them as well. So for example, there's I won't be able to flick to the page quickly. There's floating on the sea, and you imagine that when you're breathing in, you're going up a wave, and when you breathe out, you go down, and maybe the waves slow down the more that you pay attention to your breath. And of course, we're trying to get the breath slow, because the slower you're breathing, the more calm you feel. And then there's this one, which is on the back of a horse with wings, and that's where you imagine that as you're breathing in, the wings go up, as you breathe out, they go back down. And I tried these out on children as well and got feedback. And one child's mum said to me, she doesn't know what a Pegasus is. So I was like, what about a wind horse? No, she won't understand that either. And it's a child who's actually on the autistic spectrum. And so her mum was like, it's very literal. It's got to be really straightforward and literal. So like, right, okay, horse with wings. So yeah, they were tested on different people, and I used the feedback, and then we published it last October. And yeah, I get lovely feedback from families and from schools who've used it on children.
No, it is lovely, and the artwork is really, really beautiful as well. So, you know, well done to your illustrator, and also the text as well. I think it's really well written. I've had to adapt it for my students, because obviously, as English language learners, English is not their first language, and depending on their level, especially the younger ones, they have very little English. So, you know, I think you can simplify it for your needs. Simplify it, make it shorter, because some of them are fairly long for younger children. But I do think it's really, really great, because there's so many things that children relate to. Yeah, so like the one about ice cream, football, favorite smells, and then more imaginative stories like magic carpet rides and things like that. Where did you get like the ideas and inspiration for the specific ideas, the specific relaxation?
I think, I mean, some of them aren't 100% original. They're based on other relaxations I've heard. I'm not plagiarizing, but the idea is sort of floating off the ground isn't original. So I was just like, well, your yoga mat could be a magic carpet. Imagine floating out the window. That particular one was so related to lockdown, because in it you're looking down at the streets around your home. And I just imagined empty streets, and I got to know the streets around my home so well, because we were allowed out for a walk every day, and we pounded the pavement. It had to be from your front door. You couldn't get in a car and drive somewhere. So we knew the local area. And one of the things that really hit me at the time was the empty playgrounds. And so there's a bit in that particular relaxation about maybe you fly over a playground, and are there any children in it, or is it empty? And then at the end, there's a rainbow. And in the UK, the way that people supported the National Health Service, they showed their support by asking children to draw rainbows and put them in their windows. So when we did our lockdown walks, we'd be spotting rainbow pictures. And so in this magic carpet one, you float to a rainbow, and you follow it back down to your door and go in through the door. So it's such a lockdown story without it being about lockdown. Other ideas, the red blood cell one, you imagine you're following a red blood cell around your body. There is a yoga relaxation technique called a rotation of consciousness. So someone will name different body parts, and you're just lying there taking your attention around, and you normally start with your thumb. So it goes right hand thumb, second finger, third finger, fourth finger, fifth finger, and it goes on around your body, every single limb, every single point. And by the end of it, you're just totally floppy. And I thought, let's just imagine that there's a red blood cell going around your body. There was a film when I was little, and it's called something like Incredible Voyage or Amazing Adventure or something like that, where a group of scientists shrink a submarine to a tiny, like, molecule-sized submarine, and some scientists go inside. They're injected into someone's body to try and save their life. And I just remember this amazing film where they're like going down the bloodstream, or they end up in the lungs. I think this submarine ends up getting sneezed out again. And I thought, it'd be great fun to travel around someone's body. So this red blood cell relaxation is a mix of that film and also the idea of a rotation of consciousness. And it's breath awareness as well. So in mine, you breathe in to send your no, how, I forgot which way. I think you breathe in to send your red blood cell away from your heart, and then breathe out to bring it back again. So that is an original idea. That's not something I've done in any other relaxations that I've read or used.
And did you use your own children's ideas for some of the relaxations?
I did actually. So the football shirts one. So this came about. So it's another rainbow one. But a colours relaxation is not an original idea either. You go through the different colours of the rainbow, and you imagine for red you can see tomatoes, and for orange you can see carrots, and you just go through the colours of the rainbow, imagining different colours. Now, when the children were drawing rainbows to go in windows, my son decided to do a row of football shirts. So he cut out these paper football shirts and he coloured them in according to different football teams. So red could have been Liverpool or Man United and so on. So he did this wonderful football shirt thing. And I said, oh, I could use that idea for a relaxation script. So instead of imagining lots of red things, you just imagine you're sort of getting folded up in a massive red football shirt. And my husband advised me not to do English teams because he said there'll be rivalries. So I did international teams. So red, I actually used the England second shirt at the time. They then changed it to a blue one. But I looked back and like over the years, they do change and it'll be red again one day. So you go through the different colours of the rainbow. So there's the Netherlands, there's Brazil. I did the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland because they're both emerald green. France and Scotland because there isn't a purple national kit. And then finishing with white. And for white, we go back to the England kit again. And the rainbow, I don't know if you know much about the chakras, but it's this idea that we've got these energy centers going up the spine, and the red one is at the bottom, and that's to do with safety and security. And you kind of gradually build up to the white one at the top of your head, which is about intuition and sort of feeling that you're at one with the universe. So I finished by saying for the white football shirt that football fans might support different teams, but we're all connected because we have a love of the same game. So I'm sort of bringing in ideas from yoga philosophy as well.
It's lovely. It's a lovely book, and
yeah,
but both of them are. And that's the kind of last thing I wanted to ask you was, how can people get hold of these books if they're interested? Where can they buy them, or if they want to find out more, where can they go?
They can buy them on Amazon. If you're in different countries, you go to the Amazon version of your country. You can also order from me. So my website is boxmoreyoga.co.uk. But if you are not in the UK, it's easier to get it from your local Amazon. That's the best way because it'll get sent to you using local postage.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about following you on social media if people are interested in your yoga practice?
Okay, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but not so much. But all of my social media handles are at Boxmore Yoga.
At Boxmore Yoga. Well, I'm going to share the links anyway in the post when I post this. Well, that's all I kind of wanted to ask you. Thanks so much, Maria, for joining me. It's been really interesting and lots of fun. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share before we go?
I think I want to go back to talking about breathing again, because something that you said about teachers managing their own breathing as well. And I find that is really useful as a parent as well, because as human beings, we're herd animals and we do actually tap into how each other are feeling. So if you have got a child in front of you who is distressed or angry, if you step back and slow your breathing down first, that will have some effect on them. If they're getting wound up and you're getting wound up, it's just going to escalate. But if you can just think, right, I'm going to slow down, relax my shoulders and just inhale and exhale, you'll feel a bit more rational about how you respond to them, and hopefully they will pick up on it as well. And you can pretty much calm an entire room of people down if your breathing is nice and slow. So that's that's a tip I find useful as a parent and a teacher.
That's definitely a really useful tip for teachers, especially, primary and secondary as well. I think, just as a way of kind of managing the classroom. Well, thanks again, Maria. It's been great, and well, good luck with your future publishing projects and your yoga classes, and hopefully we'll see more self-published books by Maria Oliver in the future.